Dahlia clinked her fork against her wine glass at precisely 9:30, demanding attention like the demanding princess she'd always been. Everyone, I'd like to propose a toast to my dear mother-in-law Marisol, who has just delivered the wonderful news that she's unemployed again, having quit her job for health reasons. Her voice dripped with feigned sweetness as she drew air quotes and her perfectly manicured nails caught the candlelight. How does it feel to be such a complete failure at your age? The entire dining table fell silent. My son Raphael's colleagues and their wives stared at their plates, pretending not to have heard what she'd just said to a 64-year-old woman who had buried her husband 2 years prior. I placed my own wine glass down with deliberate care, my hand as steady as a surgeon's. "Well, Dahlia," I said, my voice as placid as morning coffee. "I imagine it feels about as good as finding out you're being evicted from the house you've been living in rent-free for the past 3 years. I paused, letting that sink in, before delivering the knockout blow. "Because starting tomorrow, you and Raphael have 30 days to find your own place." Dahlia's face went from smug satisfaction to ashen in less than 2 seconds. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about this house, which you've so enthusiastically redecorated, which you call our home in your little social media posts, belongs to me, not Raphael me." I smiled sweetly, the same expression she had worn moments before. "The funny thing about property deeds is, they're public information." Raphael dropped his fork with a clatter. "Mom, what?" "Oh honey, didn't your wife tell you that when you couldn't get a mortgage because of your student loans, I bought this house outright? Your names aren't on the deed. They never were." I stood up, smoothing my navy blue dress. "Dahlia, you were particularly venomous tonight. So let me make myself perfectly clear. You have exactly 30 days to pack your things and find another place to live. I suggest you start looking for places you can actually afford on your part-time yoga instructor's salary." Dahlia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Around the table, Raphael's colleagues were suddenly very interested in their dessert plates, though I could see the barely concealed smirks. No one particularly liked Dahlia. She had a talent for alienating people. "You can't just kick us out," she finally stammered. "Oh, but I can. It's called being a landlord, my dear. Look it up." I picked up my purse and my scarf. "Thank you for a lovely evening, everyone. Raphael. We'll talk tomorrow when you've had time to process this." "Dahlia, if I were you, I'd start checking apartment listings. The rental market is brutal this time of year." And with that, I walked out of my own dining room, leaving behind a woman who had just learned that karma, much like good wine, is best served at just the right temperature. The next morning, I sat in my sunroom with coffee and the newspaper, waiting for the inevitable call. It came at 7:15, like clockwork. "Mom, what the hell happened last night?" Raphael's voice was tight, exhausted. I could imagine him pacing back and forth in the kitchen, running his hands through his hair, just as he had done since he was 5 years old and in trouble. "Mind your language, Raphael, and I think you know exactly what happened. Your wife decided to humiliate me in front of a room full of strangers. So I reminded her of her place in the world. You can't kick us out of our home. It's not your home, honey. It never was." I set my coffee cup down with deliberate calm. "Remember when you and Dahlia were looking for houses 3 years ago? You were so excited about that little townhouse on Maplewood Lane, but the bank wouldn't approve your loan because of your student debt.
The length on the other end of the line.
Remember how I offered to help? How I said I'd figure something out?" I continued. "What you don't know is that I didn't co-sign a loan, Raphael. I bought that house outright cash. $600,000 from your father's life insurance. But the mortgage payments you're making, that's what you're paying me in rent. Every month for 3 years, you've been paying me rent, not a bank. The house belongs to me, Raphael. It always has." I let that sink in for a moment. I just put it in my name because I wanted to protect my investment. A wise decision, as it turns out. "Why didn't you tell us?" There was something in his voice. Not anger, but genuine confusion. My son, for all his faults, was not cruel like his wife. He was just weak. And weakness could be forgiven, cruelty could not. Because I wanted you to feel like you were standing on your own 2 feet. I wanted you to have dignity, to be proud of your accomplishments. Your father and I always said we would help you children without making you feel helpless. I paused. But dignity and pride have to be earned, Raphael. They can't be given, and certainly not bought. Dahlia says you're vindictive. Dahlia says a lot of things. Most of them are about as valuable as her yoga certifications. I let the sarcasm show through just a little. Raphael needed to hear it, even if he wasn't ready to accept it yet. She's my wife, Mom. Yes, she is, and I'm your mother. But this isn't about taking sides, honey. This is about respect, about basic human decency, about your wife finding it acceptable to call your 64-year-old mother a failure in front of a room full of people. The line was silent for a long moment. When Raphael spoke again, his voice was quieter, younger. What are we going to do? I want you to find your own place. Qualify for your own loan. Build your own life without using me as a safety net that you can abuse. I softened my tone by only a fraction. Raphael, I love you. I always will, but I will not be treated like a doormat in my own home by a woman who has never worked a full day in her life. And if we can't find a place in 30 days? Then you'll figure it out. You're 35 years old, Raphael. It's time to start acting like it. Dahlia appeared at my door the next afternoon at 2 p.m., dressed in designer athleisure wear and carrying a bouquet of grocery store flowers. The peace offering routine, I had seen it before. Marisol, we need to talk. She pushed past me into the hallway without waiting for an invitation. Her yoga-toned body moved with the confident gait of someone who had never truly faced consequences for her actions. Make yourself at home, I said, closing the door behind her. She placed the flowers on the entryway table and turned to me, her expression a practiced blend of contrition and determination. I want to apologize for last night. I was out of line. Yes, you were. I've just been under a lot of stress lately. My studio isn't doing well, and with the holidays and everything. She let the excuse hang in the air like a bad smell. Your yoga studio, the one that's been in development for 2 years. I raised an eyebrow. The one that's never had any paying clients? Dahlia's perfect facade cracked a little. It takes time to build a client base. I'm sure it does. Tell me, how much money have you and Raphael invested in this business venture of yours? Roughly. I don't see what that has to do with anything. Humor me. She shifted her weight uncomfortably, her designer shoes squeaking on the hardwood. Maybe $20,000 for equipment, marketing, insurance. I nodded thoughtfully. $20,000 for a business that generates no income, while living rent-free in a house worth $750,000. I walked past her towards the kitchen, forcing her to follow me like a supplicant. Dahlia, do you know what I did for a living before I retired? You were an accountant or something? I was a financial crimes investigator for the IRS for 32 years. I specialized in tracking down fraudulent business expenses and unreported income. I filled the kettle with water, my movements deliberate and calm. So, when you tell me your yoga studio has no paying clients, I find that curious, because according to your social media posts, you're teaching private lessons in some very expensive homes, in very affluent neighborhoods. The color drained from Dahlia's face. Those are just friends helping me practice. Friends who pay you in cash. Under the table. Unreported income. I turned to face her, leaning against the counter. How much cash, Dahlia? Rough estimate. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I think you're running a very nice little cash business, teaching yoga to bored housewives who pay premium rates for the convenience of not having to drive to a studio. I think you've actually made quite a lot of money. You just aren't reporting it. Dahlia's hands were trembling now. You can't prove anything. Can't I? Your phone has GPS tracking. Your car has GPS tracking. I have 32 years of experience tracking down tax dodgers. And you have the technological sophistication of a teenager. I smiled benignly. Besides, Your clients post about their sessions on their own social media accounts. They tag you, Dahlia. They thank you by name. They even mention how much they love their private instructor. She sank onto one of my kitchen chairs, all pretense abandoned. What do you want? I want you to understand that I am not a helpless old woman you can push around. I am not your doormat, and I am not your ATM. I poured hot water over tea bags, the domestic gesture at odds with the steel in my voice. I want you to know that if you ever speak to me like you did last night again, I will not only kick you out of my house, I will report your unreported income to the IRS, with documentation. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Raphael appeared at my door alone that evening. His face was drawn, exhausted, like a man who had spent the day having very difficult conversations. Dahlia told me about your conversation today. He sank into the armchair in the living room that his father used to occupy, looking older than his 35 years. Did she tell you about her cash business? She said you were threatening to report her to the IRS over a few yoga lessons. I sat in my own armchair, studying my son's face. A few yoga lessons that generate unreported income is tax evasion, Raphael. It's not a hobby when you're charging $100 an hour. His head snapped up. $100 an hour? You didn't know. I kept my voice gentle. There was no point in twisting the knife. Raphael was finally beginning to see his wife for who she really was. She's been doing 6 to 8 private lessons a week for the last year. That's almost $30,000 in unreported income. Raphael was silent for a long time, doing the math in his head. She told me she was barely making anything, that the business was failing. The business she reported on her taxes is failing. The business she's actually running is quite successful. I reached for my tea, giving him time to process. Raphael, when was the last time you saw Dahlia's bank account? We have separate accounts. She said it was better for building her business credit. Separate accounts, of course. I was beginning to understand the full picture, and it was uglier than I had imagined. Honey, sit down. We need to talk about a few things. For the next hour, I walked my son through the reality of his marriage. The hidden income, the tax evasion, the fact that he had been living off his teacher's salary while his wife hoarded cash in accounts he knew nothing about. I feel like such an idiot, he finally said. You're not an idiot. You're trusting. There's a difference. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But Raphael, you have to understand that this isn't just about money, it's about fundamental dishonesty. Your wife has been lying to you about her income for over a year. What am I supposed to do? That's not my decision to make. You're a grown man.
I stot ab, signaling the end of our conversation.
But whatever you decide, you have 26 days to find a new place. That deadline isn't changing. And if Dahlia and I work things out? I looked at my son. Truly looked at him. He was still hoping for a fairy tale ending, still believed that love could conquer all. Maybe it could, but not with Dahlia. Then you work them out in your own house, with your own mortgage, with your own money and hers, all of it reported to the proper authorities. I kissed his forehead, just as I had when he was a small boy and the world was simpler.
26 days, Raphael.
I mean it. 3 days later, Dahlia made her second mistake. She brought back up. I was in my garden, pruning the last of the winter roses, when a black BMW pulled into my driveway. Dahlia emerged, followed by an older woman in an expensive suit, who walked with the confident stride of someone accustomed to getting her way. Marisol, this is my mother, Amina Hayes, Dahlia announced, as if introducing a queen. Amina Hayes was everything Dahlia aspired to be. Perfectly coiffed, designer everything, and an aura of the kind of entitlement that came from never being told no. She surveyed my modest bungalow the way someone might examine an insect under a microscope. Mrs. Wagner, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Her voice had the crisp authority of someone used to managing lesser people. Dahlia has explained the situation, and frankly, I think you're being unreasonable. I put down my pruning shears and removed my gloves, taking my time. And what situation would that be, Mrs. Hayes? This eviction nonsense. Dahlia and Raphael have been living here for 3 years. They have rights. They have the rights of tenants whose lease I choose not to renew. Amina's smile was sharp, like a blade. In fact, they have the rights of family members who have contributed to this household for years. Dahlia has maintained this property, improved it, invested her time and energy to make it a home. Ah, so that was the angle they were trying. Adverse possession, property improvements, a claim that Dahlia had somehow earned partial ownership through her contributions. Interesting theory, I said. Tell me, Mrs. Hayes, what exactly has Dahlia contributed to this household? She has managed household expenses, coordinated maintenance, overseen renovations. With whose money? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Amina's confident smile wavered by only a fraction. I'm not sure I understand. Every renovation, every improvement, every maintenance call, was paid for with my money. Mrs. Hayes, Dahlia hasn't contributed a single dollar to this household in 3 years. She's been playing house with someone else's money. She's provided services, the same services any tenant might provide, caring for the property where you live. Hardly grounds for ownership. Amina's facade was beginning to crack. She had come here expecting to intimidate a lonely old widow. Instead, she was facing someone who had dealt with people far more sophisticated than her daughter for 3 decades. Furthermore, I continued, my voice as pleasant as a Sunday morning, I'm curious about Dahlia's business records. Does she report all her income to you, Mrs. Hayes, when you do her taxes? And I assume you do, given your concern for her financial affairs. Do you account for the cash payments from her private yoga lessons? Dahlia went pale. Amina looked confused. What cash payments? I smiled sweetly. Perhaps you should ask your daughter about her very successful cash business. I'm sure the IRS would be fascinated to hear about it as well. Amina turned to Dahlia, who looked as if she wanted to sink into the ground. What is she talking about? It's nothing, Mom. Just a few private lessons. A few private lessons that generate about $2,500 a month in unreported income, I clarified helpfully. But I'm sure it was just an oversight. These things happen. The silence that followed was exquisite. Mother and daughter, caught in their own web of lies and tax evasion. Amina Hayes, who had come here to intimidate me, was suddenly faced with the possibility that her daughter was a criminal. I think this conversation is over, Amina finally said. I think you're right, I agreed. 20 days, Dahlia. Don't forget. The revelation came on a Tuesday afternoon, wrapped in the mundane package of a misdirected text message. I was having coffee with my neighbor, Callista, when my phone buzzed with a notification. Dahlia's name appeared on the screen, but instead of a call, she had sent a text meant for someone else entirely. Can't wait to see you tonight. Raphael's working late again, and the old hag will be asleep by 9 p.m. We'll have the whole house to ourselves. Wear the cologne I like, Joaquin. Callista looked over my shoulder as I read it, her eyes widening behind her reading glasses. Well, she said dryly, that's interesting. Interesting was one word for it. I had others, but they weren't fit for polite company. I screenshotted the message, then sent a reply. I believe this was meant for someone else, Dahlia. You might want to be more careful with your phone. The reply came within seconds. Oh God, Marisol. I can explain. I'm sure you can. Get home now. 20 minutes later, Dahlia burst through my front door, her face flushed with panic and exertion. She had evidently run all the way from wherever she'd been.
Marisol, please, you don't understand.
I understand perfectly. You're having an affair. I placed my phone on the coffee table, the screenshot still glowing on the screen. The question is, does Raphael know?
It's not what you think.
It's exactly what I think. You're cheating on my son in my house, while he's working double shifts to pay for your lifestyle. I stood up, every inch of my 5'3" frame radiating fury. How long? It doesn't matter. How long, Dahlia? 8 months, she whispered. 8 months. While Raphael worked overtime to pay for her fake yoga business, while he worried about money and their future, while he continually defended her to me.
Who is he?
You don't know him. Try me. Dahlia's face crumpled. She knew she was caught, knew there was no way out. His name is Marcos.
Marcos Santos.
He owns a construction company. The name didn't mean anything to me at the time, but I filed it away for future reference. In my experience, men who cheated with married women usually had their own complications.
Does his wife know?
Dahlia's silence was answer enough.
I see.
So you're not just destroying my son's marriage, you're destroying someone else's too. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over the keypad.
What's her name, Dahlia?
Marisol, please.
What's her name? Nayeli.
Nayeli Santos.
But you can't.
Can't what? Tell her that her husband is sleeping with a married woman, in someone else's house? Not inform her that her marriage is a lie. I looked at Dahlia with all the disgust I felt. You have no right to ask me for anything, Dahlia.
None at all.
If you tell Nayeli, it'll destroy 2 families. You've already destroyed 2 families. I'm just evening the score. I paused, weighing my options. But I'll give you a choice. You can tell Raphael about the affair yourself tonight, and end this farce of a marriage with some dignity. Or I can tell him, along with his father-in-law, your mother, and Mrs. Santos. You're blackmailing me. I'm giving you an opportunity to do the right thing for once in your pathetic life. I walked to the front door and opened it. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Either way, Raphael is finding out the truth. The only question is whether it comes from you or from me. Dahlia stood frozen in my living room, clutching her phone like a lifeline.
Oh, and Dahlia, pack your bags to nicht.
Affair or no affair. You're still out in 20 days. This just makes things easier for everyone involved. After she left, I sat in my father's old armchair, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what I had discovered. My son, my gentle, trusting son, was married to a woman who defrauded the government, lied about her income, and cheated on him in the house I had bought to give them a fresh start. Some people, I realized, didn't deserve fresh starts. Some people deserved exactly what they got. Raphael's car pulled into the driveway at 11:30 p.m., earlier than usual. Through my bedroom window, I watched him sit in the cab for several minutes before he finally got out and walked to the front door with the heavy steps of a man carrying an enormous burden. I had been expecting this conversation since Dahlia left that afternoon. The only question was whether she had found the courage to tell him herself, or if she had tried to spin an alternate version of events. The soft knock on my bedroom door told me everything I needed to know. Mom, are you awake?
Come in, Annie.
Raphael looked as if he'd aged 10 years in 8 hours. His teacher's clothes were crumpled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes had the shocked look of someone whose world had just imploded. She told me about Marcos, he said, without preamble, sinking into the reading chair beside my bed. I'm sorry you had to hear it from her. Really? Because Dahlia seems to think you orchestrated all of this, that you were looking for ways to break us up from the beginning. I studied my son's face in the lamplight. Do you believe that?
I don't know what to believe anymore.
He rubbed his face with both hands. Months, Mom. She's been lying to me for 8 months. About the money, about the business, about everything. I know. How did you know about the affair? I mean, how long have you suspected? I showed him the screenshot of Dahlia's misdirected text. He read it twice, his jaw tightening with each word. She brought him here. In our home. In your home. His voice was flat, emotionless. While I was working double shifts, trying to save money for our future, she was bringing her boyfriend into the house you bought for us. Yes. Raphael was silent for a long time, staring at the phone screen. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. What kind of person does that make me, that I never suspected, never noticed anything? It makes you trusting. It makes you a good man who expected his wife to be a good wife. I reached out and squeezed his hand. Raphael, this isn't your fault, none of it is. She says she wants to make it right, go to counseling, start somewhere new. And what do you want? I want the last 3 years of my life back. I don't want to feel like the biggest fool who ever lived. He looked up at me, with eyes that reminded me of the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I want to understand how I could marry someone I don't even know. People show us who they want us to see, Raphael. Dahlia showed you someone she thought you would love. The question now is, can you love who she really is? Could you, if it were Dad? The question hit harder than expected. No, I said honestly. I couldn't, but that's me, and this is your life. You have to make your own decision.
Raphael nodded slowly.
18 more days. 18 days. Good, because I don't think I can look at this house the same way anymore. Dahlia's mother returned 3 days later, this time with her own backup. I watched from my kitchen window as Amina Hayes stepped out of her BMW, followed by a man in an expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase. Lawyer, I muttered to myself, not particularly surprised. I had expected this escalation. The doorbell rang at precisely 10 a.m. Amina stood on my porch with her companion, both wearing the grim expressions of people preparing for battle. Mrs. Wagner, this is Hugo Hayes, my ex-husband and Dahlia's father. He's also an attorney. Hugo Hayes was everything Amina was. Polished, expensive, and with the kind of confidence that came from winning most battles before they began. He surveyed my home as a general might survey a battlefield. Mrs. Wagner, I think we need to discuss this situation like reasonable adults. I am perfectly reasonable, Mr. Hayes. Your daughter, however, has committed tax fraud and adultery in my home. I'm not sure how much more reasonable I can be than simply asking her to leave. His smile was sharp, like broken glass. Adultery is not grounds for eviction in this state, and as for the tax matters, those are between Dahlia and the IRS. You are absolutely correct, but being my tenant is grounds for eviction, and I am choosing not to renew her lease. There is no lease, Mrs. Wagner. Your son and daughter-in-law have been living here as family members, not tenants. They have legal rights that extend beyond simple landlord-tenant relationships. I poured myself coffee, taking my time. 20 years of dealing with lawyers during IRS investigations had taught me not to be intimidated by expensive suits and legal jargon. Rights such as adverse possession, property improvements, implied partnership in the property due to contributions and improvements. He pulled documents from his briefcase. Dahlia has invested significant time and money into maintaining and improving this property. She has a legal claim to partial ownership. The bluff was sophisticated. I had to give him that. The kind of legal intimidation that worked on people who didn't understand property law. Unfortunately for Hugo Hayes, I had spent 32 years working with lawyers far cleverer than he. Interesting theory, I said pleasantly. Tell me, Mr. Hayes, how much money has Dahlia invested in property improvements? Thousands of dollars, over 3 years. From what source? Her yoga business? The one that only exists on paper? Or perhaps from her unreported cash income, hidden from the IRS? Amina and Hugo exchanged glances. I could see them realizing their daughter had given them incomplete information about her financial situation. Furthermore, I continued, adverse possession requires an open, notorious, and hostile occupation of property. Dahlia has been living here with my permission, paying rent, and acknowledging my ownership for 3 years. She has no legal claim whatsoever to this property. Hugo's confident smile wavered slightly. The rental agreement was informal. There's no documentation. Actually, there is. I walked to my desk drawer and pulled out a folder full of bank records. 3 years of checks, made out to Marisol Wagner, with rent in the memo line. 12 checks a year for 36 months. All deposited into my personal account. The silence that followed was deafening. Your daughter was my tenant, Mr. Hayes. Nothing more, nothing less. And now, she's being evicted for cause. I handed him a formal eviction notice I had prepared that morning. 10 more days. Callista Scholes knocked on my door the next morning with information that changed everything. Marisol, I need to tell you something about your daughter-in-law. Callista's face was serious, worried in a way I rarely saw.
Yesterday, after those lawyers left, I made a few calls. I invited her in for coffee, sensing that what she had discovered was significant.
My cousin Nayeli works at the county clerk's office. I asked her to look up some records.
Callista sat at my kitchen table, her hands cupping her coffee mug.
Marisol, Dahlia isn't just cheating on Rafael, she's married to someone else. The words hit me like a physical blow. What?
She married Marcos Santos in Las Vegas 6 months ago.
There's a marriage certificate.
My mind raced through the implications, but she's already married to Rafael.
That's the point. She's committed bigamy.
Dahlia is legally married to 2 men at the same time.
Bigamy, a felony.
Dahlia hadn't just had an affair, she had been committing a crime in my house for 6 months.
Does Rafael know?
I thought you should be the one to tell him, but Marisol, there's more. Callista's voice dropped to a whisper. Nayeli also checked Marcos Santos's property records. He's been transferring assets to Dahlia's name, money, investments, even partial ownership of his construction business. The picture became clearer, and it was uglier than I had imagined. Dahlia hadn't just stumbled into an affair, she had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to siphon money from 2 men simultaneously. My son, who supported her with his teacher's salary and my house, and Marcos Santos, who was apparently transferring significant assets to her.
She planned this, I said aloud. The pieces clicked into place.
The separate bank accounts, the cash business, moving into our house rent-free.
She had been building a nest egg with Rafael's money and Marcos's assets. There's something else.
Marcos Santos is worth about $4 million, and he's been very generous with his new wife. Callista pulled out a folder of documents Nayeli had printed. Property transfers, bank account changes, business partnerships, all dated within the last 6 months. All assets transferred from Marcos Santos to Dahlia Foma Santos.
What happened to Marcos's first wife?
Nayeli? Divorced 4 months ago. He left her for Dahlia, transferred significant assets during the divorce proceedings, and married Dahlia immediately after the divorce.
Callista shook her head.
Marisol, this woman is a professional. She hasn't just destroyed one family, she planned it all. I stared at the documents spread out on my kitchen table. Dahlia wasn't just a cheating wife or a tax evader. She was a criminal, committing bigamy, fraud, and systematically destroying multiple families for financial gain.
9 more days, I said softly. Are you going to tell Rafael?
I'm going to tell everyone who needs to know. The investigation that would ultimately shatter Dahlia's carefully constructed world had actually begun 3 weeks prior, initiated by someone I had never met. Detective Anya Sharma of the State Bureau of Investigation called me on Thursday afternoon, but not for the reason I expected. Mrs. Wagner, I understand you may have information regarding the activities of Dahlia Hayes. We're currently investigating financial fraud and bigamy, reported by Nayeli Santos. It turned out Nayeli Santos had been building a case against her ex-husband and Dahlia for months. When Marcos had suddenly divorced her and transferred significant assets, she had hired a private investigator who had uncovered the bigamy almost immediately. The bigamy charge is clear-cut, Detective Sharma explained during our meeting in my living room. Dahlia married your son in 2021 and Marcos Santos 6 months ago in Las Vegas, without dissolving her first marriage. But we're also looking into mail fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion. I provided everything I had documented, the marriage certificates Callista had found, the evidence of the hidden income, the asset transfers, the timeline of Dahlia's lies. Detective Sharma listened intently, adding my evidence to what was clearly already an extensive case. Mrs. Wagner, we've been watching Dahlia for 2 weeks. We've found financial records showing she's been running a kind of marriage con scheme. Your family wasn't her first target. The revelation hit me like a physical blow.
What do you mean?
We found evidence that Dahlia researched several families as potential targets over the last 18 months, before focusing on your son. Wealthy widows with unmarried children specifically. Your family fit a profile she systematically targeted. The full scope of Dahlia's scheme was breathtaking in its cold calculation. She hadn't simply stumbled into criminality. She had planned, systematically targeting families like mine for over a year before she even met Raphael. "We'll be making arrests tomorrow," Detective Sharma said. "Both Dolya and Marcos will be charged with federal crimes. The evidence is overwhelming." That evening, I told Raphael everything about the investigation, about Dolya's systematic targeting of our family, about the fact that their entire relationship had been a calculated fraud from the beginning. He listened in silence as I explained how Dolya had researched our family, planned their meeting, orchestrated their relationship, with the ultimate goal of gaining access to my assets. When I finished, he sat quietly for several minutes, processing the enormity of what he had learned. "So, nothing was real," he finally said. "Not a single moment of our 3-year marriage was real."
I'm sorry, honey.
"Don't be. It actually makes it easier." He looked at me with something that might have been relief. "For months, I've been wondering what I did wrong, how I failed as a husband. Now I know I didn't fail. I was just the target of a professional criminal." 3 hours later, I watched from my front window as police cars surrounded my house. Dolya's face was priceless as they handcuffed her. Shock, disbelief, and finally, the cold rage of someone whose meticulously planned scheme had crumbled to dust. Raphael came home as they were loading her into the squad car. He stood in our driveway, watching his wife disappear into a police vehicle, his face a mask of emotions I couldn't interpret. "9 more days," he said as he came inside. "Take all the time you need. The house will be here when you're ready to figure out what comes next." The final truth came during Dolya's sentencing, delivered by Prosecutor Olivia Reed in a courtroom packed with Dolya's victims.
Your Honor.
The defendant operated a sophisticated marriage fraud scheme for over 2 years, targeting widowed women and their adult children across 3 states. The Wagner family was victim number 7. 7 families. Dolya had destroyed 7 families before she got to mine. Raphael and I sat in the public gallery, listening as the prosecutor laid out the full scope of Dolya's crimes. Financial fraud, bigamy, tax evasion, identity theft. The charges took 20 minutes to read. The defendant researched affluent families, identified vulnerabilities, and then systematically infiltrated them through romantic relationships with family members. She cultivated financial dependence, gained access to family resources, and then committed bigamy with wealthier targets, all while maintaining her original marriages for continued financial support. The courtroom was silent as the prosecutor explained how Dolya had stolen over $3 million from her victims across 3 states, how she had, at times, been married to 4 different men simultaneously, how she had left a trail of destroyed families and broken lives. The Wagner family was fortunate, the prosecutor continued. Mrs. Marisol Wagner's background in financial investigation allowed her to recognize the fraud before the defendant could complete her scheme. Other families were not so lucky. Dolya sat at the defendant's table, her designer clothes replaced by an orange jumpsuit, looking nothing like the confident woman who had once called me a failure in my own dining room. When the judge sentenced her to 8 years in a state correctional facility, she didn't even flinch. Marcos Santos received 4 years for his role in the asset transfer fraud. Nayeli Santos was also in the courtroom and had recovered most of her stolen property through the investigation. After the sentencing, Nayeli approached Raphael and me in the hallway. "I wanted to thank both of you," she said. "Your evidence helped convict her. But more than that, it helped me understand that what happened to my family wasn't personal. For Dolya, it was just business." "How are you doing?" I asked. "Better.
I'm rebuilding.
Just like your son." Sometimes, when someone shows you who they really are, the best thing you can do is believe them the first time. 3 months later, Raphael moved into his own apartment across town. The house felt quiet without him, but it was a peaceful quiet, the quiet of a storm finally past. If you're watching this, I hope you remember that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who teach us the most important lessons. Dolya taught me that kindness without boundaries is just weakness, and that protecting the people you love sometimes means being ruthless with the people who would harm them. As for me, I'm right where I belong, in my own home, living my own life, accountable to no one but myself. And that, it turns out, is worth more than all the money in the world. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Callista's Stories and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. If you enjoyed this story and would like to support the creation of more such narratives, please consider a small donation. Every contribution helps us continue and share more stories with you. Thank you for your support.